Hello and welcome to Wait, It Gets Better, the improvisational storytelling podcast, where every week a few friends get together, putting aside all of their differences and coming together to join our heads together, kind of like Voltron, to become a super powerful mech of storytelling. I am, of course, head of the Voltron, Levi.
I'm Reed.
And I am the mighty arms and mighty legs of Voltron storyteller, Seth.
All right.
What do you read?
Okay. That's all deep for me.
Okay.
He doesn't know what Voltron is. He's old. Reed, were you going to give us a flashback synopsis of the previous episode?
Yes, this is the fungus from space. And it has one of the great villains of all time. Levi's story element was villain. And it turns out that on a couple of planets about 120 million years ago, this mold began to grow. And it was happening simultaneously on a couple of planets. So we know it wasn't indigenous to one. It seems to have come from somewhere outside, but it really took hold in this one solar system. And it had this capacity to pretty much incorporate anything in its path into this single organism. And it had kind of a hive collective sort of, think Borg.
Yeah.
And as it developed, like one speculation is that a ship had landed on one of these planets, and it quickly took over the occupants of this mission, and they assimilated the technology, and they assimilated the brain and minds of the people that they found, and just incorporated all of this knowledge into this organized system. And so they began to be able to make their own spacecraft and spread out and continue this kind of a conscious conquering of the world, so to speak,
right,
of the galaxy. And they developed the ability to attach themselves to the brainstem of the higher organisms like animals and sentient species, and absorb their consciousness and keep hold of their the integrity of their mind, so to speak, so they could make use of of all their learning and all their knowledge. And they reached one point where they had a particularly aggressive empire, so to speak, that had been spreading across the stars, and they got a hold of the main general, the head of this empire, this this empire, and they kind of kept him intact instead of assimilating him into just being part of the mold collective. They used him. They continued to. They kept him alive and kept the advantage of having his understanding of battle and tactics and strategy, and he made them much more efficient in conquering. And then they would do this whenever they would find a particularly successful
consciousness.
Right, they would do that.
Right.
And at some point, this kind of gang of guys got to talking with each other, and they were real careful how they communicated only in ways that this mold fungus growth wouldn't know what they're talking about, and because they realized they really needed to get to the heart of this thing and stomp it out, because it was just it was pernicious, and they needed to stop it. But they realized this goes back. This is millions and millions of years developing, and by this time it had spread to a fifth of the galaxy, which is countless planets and solar systems. And one of the people groups that had been out in space had encountered this thing were able to flee it without getting infected, and they were able to retain the logs of the fungus attack. So they understood what was going on, and they found an unsettled world, and they landed, and their ship, they built out their ship to create kind of like a moon, so to speak, a major satellite that literally took over the place of what would be the moon on Earth, to regulate tides and kind of terraform this space, this planet. But the ship, the space station, if you will, one of the functions was fixing the atmosphere, and they created an atmospheric shield against these mold monsters. So they were kind of feeling like they had successfully dodged the bullet here, and that they, began to build a civilization here on their own little planet with their own little built-in system of isolation. Meanwhile, across the galaxy somewhere, mankind had entered the space age. They'd lost a few missions to mysterious causes, and then finally one was able to get word back and saying that they had been attacked by this mold entity, and that they realized that it has completely taken over all their systems. There was no way to cleanse their system, and they were going to have to activate a destruct sequence, a failsafe, because they knew that it would be the destruction of Earth and of humankind. And so they just sacrificed themselves. So there was this awareness back on Earth. The wise old man is a kind of a unique character. In our day, we know him as Pando, and there's a grove of poplar trees in Utah that covers about 107 acres, and it's all genetically identical. It looks like a forest of poplar trees, but they're all identical. Clones sprouting from massive underground root structure instead of by seeds and pollination and all that kind of thing. And the scientists of our time estimated at 80,000 years old. But Pando really doesn't know how old he is. The wise old man from our story, and he's probably a grove that was more in the Middle East area. There are poplar trees all over the world. But he had been, the words he used for it, he had been sung awake by the man. And it gave no indication. So for a few thousand years, he has been sentient, and he can hear the thoughts of men. He can hear what they think, but he has yet to find someone who can hear him. And the man was destroyed in a flood. There have been many kinds of things that have taken place over the years. Fires have wiped him out, and he keeps springing back. But he has heard about this fungus, and so he has been, over the years, he's had to protect himself against pollution and against natural disasters, and he's learned to seal off portions of his great root structure and keep his consciousness alive even when the trees are destroyed, and he starts again. And so my story element for this episode is the goal. And the goal of this story I'm seeing is to chart the path of the sentient species of the universe that are focused on individual identity, and to maintain that identity in the face of the threat of being assimilated into the hive collective of the mold expanse. And so that's kind of our goal. We've got the great villain, which is the mold expanse, the fungus from space. Right. And we have this one planet that's got its atmospheric system. We've got Pando, who knows how to protect itself, but still hasn't made contact with the humans on his planet, who are out there exploring space. And so anyway, does that seem like a reasonable goal to you guys?
Yeah, it does. Seems like it to me.
Okay.
Seth, what element did you have?
I had hero.
Okay, do you want to, do you have something for the hero, or should I talk about my famous person?
Why don't you talk about your famous person, and then I'll talk about the hero.
Okay, the famous person's name is John Willoughby, and he is a legendary Earth scientist / explorer. He's never been up in space, and his firm belief is that if you leave Earth, you are no longer from Earth. He's been used in several different anti-population campaigns. He's been used both for and against colonizing other worlds. But really what it all boils down to is that he's terrified of flying. If you get him all the way down to the end, it's that going up in the air is scary. And so if he can just keep his feet on the ground, that is what he likes to do. But he's a famous kind of, anytime anyone needs an expert witness or an expert opinion about something, he's always there on the panel. It's kind of like, what's his name? Neil deGrasse Tyson. Neil deGrasse Tyson is, I'm sure, a real scientist. But he also is an opinion person, and he's also very charismatic. And in the same way, John Willoughby, did I say John?
Yep.
John Willoughby is also, he's a scientist, but he's also very charismatic. He really could have chosen to also be maybe a movie star or a motivational speaker or something. But he has kind of in-depth knowledge about nearly every system that keeps the Earth together. And he travels around really kind of being an advocate for staying on the Earth. You know, as sort of space travel has become more and more and more advertised and available, he has more and more and more expressed the kind of opinion that we shouldn't go, that we shouldn't be going out there. And with this new kind of revelation, you know, he is kind of now all up in arms saying, see, I said we shouldn't go. And now we have a foreign thing that knows about us and probably knows where we're from. And if we had just stayed here, we would have been fine. And so he kind of has received this position of power because of his opinion and because of his accomplishments. So he's always kind of going on to podcasts and, you know, reporting from remote locations, and he does less education now and more advocacy for certain things, you know, like the Great Barrier Reefs. You know, he helped work and develop the systems for bringing it back, you know, a couple hundred years ago. You know, I'm thinking we're in like kind of humans live to be a couple hundred years old. Science, you know, we're just starting to like reach out into the stars, you know, like let's say like 200 years from today, basically. People are like, maybe not a couple hundred, but maybe like they live comfortably to 150 years old, you know, where they don't really start getting old until they reach 125 years old. You know, they don't start getting, you know what I mean? So it's just kind of everything's extended out. So that's the famous person. And I have the feeling that he is in some way connected to Pando. Is that his name? Pando? Like maybe he's the one who's going to hear him, or maybe he's the one who's going to like be the advocate. But right now he just kind of goes around talking about why we shouldn't leave the Earth.
Well, of course, he would be, because of his interest, for example, in the Great Barrier Reef, he would certainly be interested in, you know, what is
right
by this time, we're talking about an organism that's 80,000 years old and, you know, predates the evolution of seed, male, female plant propagation, where just strict cloning from a common root structure, so to speak. And, you know, he would definitely be interested in that, you know, poplar trees. Obviously, there are many of them, that groves of poplar trees that just produce more conventionally. But, you know, this one that we know about today, you know, is in Utah. And then I'm thinking the one that was sung awake was at maybe the Middle East somewhere, where they had capacity to be in touch with the earliest of human civilization.
Right. So that's where is Pando then? He's in the Middle East, you're saying?
Yeah, he's a grove of this poplar tree that is just an ancient, enormous root structure. Yes.
Right. Okay. But he's the one that's in the Middle East. That's the important part.
Right.
Okay. Great. I have some ideas, you know, depending on who the hero is. You know, maybe John Willoughby has sort of taken samples from these, you know. Surely with part of the thing that he's protesting is like the fact that we really haven't gotten our sort of mining system down for mining asteroids and things, you know. So there's still quite a bit of kind of strip mining and stuff that happens. And or maybe that's done now. Maybe we finally have kind of turned over to the leaf and are now finally starting to mine asteroids and things like that. And so one of the things that Willoughby is trying to sort of spearhead is the creation of the sanctuary planet, right? We need to bring Earth back to a place of perfect synergy in order so that once you guys all leave, we can have a beautiful place now. You know what I mean?
Eco-sustainability.
Yeah, no, for sure. And that's one of the things. He's like, well, there's this poplar and it like has an incredible ability to sort of propagate itself and protect itself. You know, if I bring it into a really harsh environment, like, you know, the now completely destroyed Alaskan wilderness, maybe I can use it to sort of propagate and bring the soil back and create something, you know, bring it back, basically. And I have this feeling that either Pando senses in John something about him that reminds him of the man, or John somehow is able to sense the sort of calling out that Pando has been doing and, is trying to sort of figure out what it is he's saying. But Seth, who's the hero?
So the hero is, I would say, the lone survivor of another mission that had left Earth. Kind of towards the beginning of some of their space exploration, because I remember we sent out different satellites and stuff that right now they've just been hurling through space, right?
Right.
So that seems to be a first approach. As soon as it's possible to do so, they just kind of throw something out there.
Right.
And so what this was with the advancements that they had made, they had mapped out several, let's say, semi-near systems and kind of jettisoned several ships out that direction, knowing that, let's say, they might not reach there for, 15,000 years, but by maintaining a radio link, to, base command or whatever, they could keep track on where it went and redirect kind of a directional if they needed to. If they found more stuff through a telescope that might want them to send it a different direction. And so what they have is they just kind of sent, all these things out. And what they did is they kind of gathered with kind of the idea of thinking, okay, well, maybe have we reached out to the stars before? And so, because I know one of the things they sent out, I don't know if it was just they collected it was like a time capsule of all kinds of stuff, every conceivable language they could remember or relevant things to modern culture at the time. And I think this was still back in the 60s or 70s. If someone knows, email me.
It's on the Voyager.
Is it? Yeah, they put it on.
Yeah, it's like a plaque.
Yeah, this is put a bunch of.
Do you know about this?
Information about Earth, our history, some of the different languages, all translated, all kinds of different stuff. That idea that
pioneer plaque.
Yeah, so that let's say if by chance some other sentient life was able to find it, they would give them a little bit of option to kind of be able to figure it out and possibly communicate. And that's kind of what they did, is so they just kind of collected, as scientists were able to find, as the pure, not to sound the purest genetic form of all the different kinds of species, and basically made a Noah's Ark.
Yeah.
More or less, that they sent out with these people, so that if they came to a inhabitable planet, they would be able to be, equipped with the seeds, some different, mineral starting, equipment and things that would kind of give them a boost to at least use something that they already knew or introduce, things that maybe people had brought, before. So basically on each of these ships that they sent out, they have, genetic information and, eggs and kind of, how they grow things in jars in the lab. They've got cloned or all the vials of all the different creatures and all the different, things that then, basically an early idea of a terraforming pack to, bring out everything that you'd be familiar with or could possibly be used as a recognizable, connection. However, this particular one, and the same thing with people. So there's probably 6 or 8 people on board to, give a chance that as soon as they get somewhere, but they're all in a cryo sleep
for sure
thing. And so they'll
suspended animation.
Yeah, they'll just kind of be suspended there for, 5,000, 10,000 years, who knows, until they kind of land somewhere and it's deemable that, it's suitable. Otherwise, you'll just stay suspended there forever or,
until the power runs out.
Runs out. And so all the people that kind of signed up for this, they were kind of the cream of the crop, but also had to be, it was a kamikaze mission? You're going to go out and when you wake up, no one even if there is a connection, no one is going to be around. As far as you're basically let's say 8, because let's say they're kind of copying Noah's Ark idea, right? So they put 8 individuals on each of these things, 8 volunteers, but then these 8 volunteers need to know how to read the ancient Sumerian and ancient, Egyptian or anything like that, along with, alliteration of lots of other stuff, so that they, in case they encountered something that perhaps we had gone out before, they'd have a jump start at least on communicating.
Yeah.
However, this
And that's one of these people is this guy, is your character?
correct. Mark Miller is his name, and this particular pod got picked up and kind of drawn to our kind of isolated planet that our wise old woman is on, or that has kind of got that atmospheric development to keep this shield. And so it's kind of drawn to that as a habitable planet. And it had eventually found itself. And at some point, through a different radar system, it picked that up and was able to kind of, I don't know how far the timeline we want to put on this. But anyways, that's where it's at. And it had landed there. And I want to say, at least as far as we know, he's the only one that's alive, or as far as we know, out of his chrono chamber.
Okay.
And so it's being that it's kind of, let's say, a modern ship, and this whole planet has kind of kept themselves in either like a medieval Stone Age, so that they don't kind of acquire the attention of greater, bigger things that are out there. Having some of this here would seem like a shock. And so that's something that the wise old woman has kind of picked up. Of course, she's going up to this satellite and watching things and adjusting and all of this. So she picks up this shuttle and is able to kind of bring it either to her lab up on the station. And as far as we know, our hero is awake, but he can't really remember anything. And so he is kind of constantly he's kind of being taken care of by the wise old woman, and so then he's, helping her around the place. And as she's like, trying to help him, regain his memory because he can't remember anything. She'll constantly, and I'm trying to think back to the goal that Reed had here. So being that they have all this, what she's looking for is, different traceable markers, because that's what you have, different, markers in your DNA that show, it's like if you did a paternity test, or if you went and did one of those genetic DNA things, if people knowing the right things would be able to break down similar DNA strands and where it would have diverged and all kinds of...
Right, to sort of trace where he's from in the sort of grand scheme of things.
Right. And I think that is what they find, is that, we as a people probably reached for the stars at some, grander state of antiquity that no one quite remembers, or that the same, let's say, created building blocks of our functioning code has a similar origin to it.
Right. I have this terrible idea, this kind of weird idea, and you guys can tell me if you don't want to do it, if you want to not do it or not. But I have this kind of idea that one of the reasons why Mark, is that his name, loses his memory and is so terribly disoriented is because there is also a fungus thing, a fungus entity that lives on Earth, right?
Ooh.
That thankfully, it was awakened a long time ago, and it itself acted as kind of a shield, infecting everyone on Earth and infecting the whole planet, and sort of providing kind of a shield against other enemies, other fungus. We're talking like years, like 80,000 years ago or something, before modern humanity. And, that's who, what's his name? Pando?
Yeah.
That's who Pando is. So while he infests the poplar trees, it's not in the trees. The reason why it hasn't evolved into the, it hasn't evolved into seed and male and female, tree types, and hasn't evolved out of the kind of genetic clones, is because it's the place where this fungus lives and is able to sort of propagate itself and not just kind of take over the world like the other ones have.
So I was going to say,
ones have.
Part of what I didn't get to yet, though, is they, like, basically for the poplar tree, that's what they use, of course, because they're trying to get, any of the oldest things, or the purest genetic coded things to send on this. That is like a clipping of that root system, was part of what was sent for that. So now you have all of these, let's say, Noah's Arks things that have brought Pando, in essence, all across the galaxy to wherever these things have landed or gone. And that is somehow it's starting to propagate on this other planet as well.
Right, yeah. Somehow that the poplar shields it from the environmental protections that the planet and the wise old woman have been able to sort of create and sustain. I have this kind of idea that once Pando gets someone to listen to him, whether it's John or not, he kind of mentions, Pando is like an ancient being who doesn't have a body, right? He knows he's connected to these bits and pieces of him that are hundreds of millions of miles away, He can just move over there. His whole consciousness can't move over there because it's not a grove of poplar, but he can kind of start to, as this clipping is taken out of its, cryo chamber and begin to be grown, he can start to see more and kind of get a vision more of what's over there, And so whoever ends up talking to him starts to kind of all of a sudden realize that Pando is not just talking about this place, but he's talking about all these other places where he is realizing now he used to be. That's his brothers and sisters used to live on these other places and he used to talk to them, right? But it's just been him for so long, I have this kind of picture that Pando was providing for Earth the same service that the satellite and their kind of control of agriculture and stuff are providing for this other planet. And then with sort of a kind of rapid increase in sort of industrial land clearing and strip mining, that a sort of a key article of the thing was broken. There needs to be a certain mixture of trees producing a certain mixture of oxygen in certain amounts in order to create this. Now, if you had advanced technology that you were able to control the weather and have a satellite to know exactly the chemical composition you needed, then you could just do it with normal machinery. But Pando's process is one that's much more delicate, one that's much more kind of very carefully laid out. And somewhere along the line, it got broken. I have this kind of vision that maybe John is viewed as a crazy person because he keeps talking about how he's been visited in his dreams by Mother Nature, right?
Yeah.
How they come... He doesn't call it Mother Nature, he calls it Father Nature because it speaks in a male voice, but how they visit him and they say they want to talk with him and he's trying to, so he goes to weird places trying to connect with this. And he's constantly trying to figure out what it wants him to do and how, what he's supposed to, how he's supposed to act and all these things where really somehow he's just connected to Pando as Pando's trying to get someone to listen to him, that things need to change. I don't know. What do you think about that story so far?
I think we're going a good place.
Yeah. So we have the hero who is on this other planet. We have the famous person who's kind of traveling around trying to connect to Pando. So yeah, should we call it good for today and then pick it up next week? I like this one.
Yep.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us for this episode 2 of Fungus from Space. If you like these multi-part episodes, I would love to hear about it. My personal email address is Waititgetsbettercast@gmail.com. That's the one I'm signed into on my phone. So you can just go ahead and email me anytime, day or night. That's totally fine. Otherwise, you can @ me on Twitter at @getsbettercast. You can also check out other episodes. You can also just sit tight and wait because it gets better.